Lagos had a rhythm, fast, noisy, and unapologetically alive. And in the middle of that rhythm moved Stanley, a 32-year-old software engineer whose life was organized into neat lines of code, clean shirts, and predictable routines. His apartment was a glass and steel cage overlooking Victoria Island, always spotless, always silent, always smelling faintly of coffee and new furniture. The only thing louder than his air conditioner was his loneliness. Stanley was the kind of man who could fix a crashing app faster than he could handle a conversation about emotions. His colleagues called him the Machine. His neighbors barely knew his name. And every Sunday, his mother's voice floated through the phone with the same sigh. "A grown man cannot marry his laptop, Stanley boy." One wet Friday evening, the Lagos sky broke open and poured its frustrations on the city. Stanley's car crawled through a flooded road near Aja when he noticed a rickety village bus stalled ahead, passengers waving frantically. Among them was a woman in a bright red wrapper, barefoot, balancing a tray of roasted corn on her head, shouting at the driver in full, unfiltered frustration. "Now you dey drive, or not goat," she barked. The driver begged the stubborn engine to cooperate. Stanley could have driven past. He usually did, but something about her caught him. Maybe it was the confidence in her voice, the way she commanded chaos like it owed her obedience. Against every logical instinct, he stopped, stepped into the rain, and offered help. "Excuse me," he called out, raising his voice above the downpour. "Let me take a look." The woman turned, scanning him from polished shoes to worried face. "Oga, if you fit fix am, but no come spoil and pass as he be." Her name was Charity. Within 5 minutes of conversation, Stanley realized two things. She was impossible to ignore, and she didn't know what it meant to whisper. While he worked on the bus battery, she held her tray over his head like an umbrella. Roasted corn smoke and rainwater mixing into a scent that stuck in his memory. When the engine finally sputtered to life, the passengers cheered. Charity's grin widened, fearless and bright. "Thank you, Mr. Techman," she said, handing him a roasted corn. "No man will help woman for rain suppose chop hunger." He took it, smiling awkwardly. "You're welcome." That night, the corn sat untouched on his spotless kitchen counter. Between lines of code, he found himself glancing at it, hearing her laughter echo faintly in his head. A week later, fate, or Lagos traffic, brought them together again. Stanley's company had organized a community outreach in the outskirts, helping local traders set up digital payment systems. And there she was again, Charity, arguing passionately with a volunteer about why phone wey no get strong battery na useless investment. Stanley almost choked on his water. She noticed him first. "Ah, my rain hero," she exclaimed, laughter bouncing through the hall. "You still dey save people with your computer magic?" Her energy filled the room. He joined her table, and by the end of the day, she had barely learned how to use mobile banking, but he had learned that she sold firewood and spices in a small market near Epe. Her world was full of color and noise. His was made of lines and silence, and yet their conversation flowed like current. Arguments, teasing, shared laughter over roasted plantain. In the weeks that followed, Stanley found excuses to visit her market. He claimed it was for user feedback, but the truth was simpler. He just wanted to see her again. Charity was everything he wasn't. Spontaneous, loud, full of humor and complaint. She mocked his polished accent and obsession with sanitizer. He teased her about her strange proverbs that made little grammatical sense, but too much emotional one. When he finally asked her out, over the sound of market chatter and sizzling pepper soup, she squinted at him suspiciously. "You won't worry trouble?" "I'll take the risk," he said. And risk it was. Within months, gossip spread like wildfire. A software engineer cutting a firewood seller. His friends were alarmed. "Guy," his best friend Victor whispered over drinks, "she go scatter your house. Those village girls know they hear word though." But love is deaf to reason. Charity's fire melted something in Stanley that his city life had frozen years ago. When he brought her home to meet his mother, Mrs. Monica smiled too tightly, sipping tea, while Charity filled the room with tales of market fights and weddings. 2 months later, despite every morning, Stanley married her. The wedding was chaos, a perfect blend of village noise and city polish. Charity danced barefoot, leading her new husband in steps he didn't know, while his colleagues filmed in disbelief. And somewhere in the laughter, it all felt right. When they arrived at his high-rise apartment, Stanley opened the door proudly. Charity stepped inside, blinked at the gleaming tiles and sniffed. Home? It smells like hospital. He laughed. That's the air freshener. She stared out the window. So now here we go live. No chickens, no people shouting tomato outside. It's peaceful, he said. She turned, eyes mischievous. Peaceful or dead? The next morning, Stanley woke to the crackling sound of fire. Heart pounding, he rushed out to the balcony, only to find Charity crouched happily over a 3-stone fire, blowing through a pipe, while smoke rose like incense.
"Charity!" he shouted. "What are you doing?" "Cooking breakfast," she said simply. "Gas dey smell fake. I trust firewood." "On my balcony? You burned the building down." She laughed, waving smoke away. "Relax, my engineer. Fire no dey burn person wey sabi handle am." The neighbors didn't find it funny. The caretaker came banging. "Sir, your wife is cooking with firewood on the 10th floor." Stanley apologized endlessly. But by evening, Charity had already hung pepper strings by the window and laid cassava on the dining table to dry small. The apartment began to smell like a market. Days turned to a blur of chaos and comedy. Charity fetched water with buckets despite running taps, insisted the pipe water carried bad spirit, and invited her cousins for a weekend that lasted 2 weeks. Stanley never knew what he'd come home to: a mini market, a prayer ground, or a food fair. Yet, amidst the madness, something magical happened. His cold apartment came alive. Her laughter filled the rooms. The scent of stew replaced the sterile air. Slowly, he softened. He helped her set up a safer cooking corner. She learned to use the washing machine. He learned to pound yam. Nights grew gentler, mornings warmer, until the fire alarm went off. It happened during one of his online meetings. Smoke drifted behind him as Charity shouted, "Stanley, bring water before this stew disgrace me." His colleagues froze on camera. "Is that fire?" one asked. He slammed the laptop shut, dashed out, and found the cat in half burnt. That evening, silence ruled. "I just wanted to cook for you," she said softly. He sighed, exasperated. "This isn't the village, Charity. You can't turn my house into a smokehouse." "Your house?" she echoed, eyes wet. "So now only you get them?" He tried to explain, but the words only deepened the hurt. That night, she slept in silence. The next morning, she was gone. Her wrapper hung by the door, her slippers on the floor, but she was nowhere. Stanley sat, staring at the ashes on the balcony, regret thick in his chest. By noon, she returned with vegetables and dried fish. She didn't greet him, just started cooking, humming a slow village song. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "You are right," she replied without looking up. "Maybe this your city life no fit carry woman like me." He had no answer. The days that followed were painfully quiet. The laughter died. The warmth faded. He stayed longer at work. She filled the silence with visits from market women who turned their living room into a mini social club. He wanted to complain, but seeing her smile again stopped him. Still, the gap between them widened. Their love became polite, distant. One night, Victor dragged him out for drinks. "Guy," Victor said, shaking his head, "you married fire. If you no handle am well, it go burn you." Stanley laughed weakly. "She's not fire, she's just herself." "Same thing," Victor said. The next morning, Stanley woke to hammering on the balcony. 2 men were building something. "Madam say make we install small kitchen," one explained cheerfully. Stanley stared. "Charity!" She appeared, smiling. "See am, modern firewood stove. Smoke no go disturb anybody." He blinked,
then chuckled despite himself. When she lit it, the smell of okra soup filled the air. No alarm, no panic. Just peace. They began to find rhythm again. She laughed more, he relaxed more. He even took her to his company's diversity dinner, where she proudly wore Ankara and, to his horror, demonstrated how village woman they greet husband. She knelt dramatically before him. "My lord, your soup is ready!" The hall exploded with laughter. Phones flashed. Stanley's face flushed crimson. That night, he stayed silent. "You vex because I greet you well?" she asked. "People were recording," he muttered. "And so, not shame to love your husband?" "It's not about love, it's about context." She shook her head. "You care too much about what people think. And you care too little." That night, a video of her gesture went viral. The comments were cruel. "Bushwife, poor guy." Stanley closed his phone, ashamed. 2 days later, she packed a bag. Her note was short. "You be good man, but maybe I dey too much for you. I go stay small with my sister for Epe, make we both think. If love's strong, you no go fear small fire." When he came home, the silence hit him like a wound. The air was too clean, the space too large. He sat for hours, staring at the note. Weeks passed. The loneliness grew unbearable. One evening, he found himself driving aimlessly until the road led him to Epe. He saw her from afar, carrying firewood, laughing with 2 women. She hadn't seen him yet. For a moment, he just watched. Then she turned, surprise softening her face. "Stanley," she said, "I came to see you." "For what?" "To say I miss you, and that I was wrong." She folded her arms. "Which wrong one?" "All of 'em." She smiled faintly. "This our love no easy. You want order, I want fire. You want quiet, I dey loud. Maybe that's why we work. Maybe I need your fire to remember I'm alive." For a moment, the air hung still. Then she laughed softly. "You sure say you fit handle my wahala?" He grinned. "As long as you no burn my curtain again." They both laughed, and that laughter was their answer. He stayed in her village for a few days, helping fetch water, learning to chop wood, fumbling through chores as children mocked him good-naturedly. The city man was becoming part of her world, and somewhere between the yam pounding and evening fires, Charity began to believe in them again. One night, under the stars, they shared roasted plantain. "Why you marry me?" she asked. "Because you made me laugh, and because every time you spoke, it felt like life." She smiled. "And now?" "Now, I know love isn't about changing someone, it's building a new world together." The next morning, her mother handed Stanley a small clay pot. She said, "Take this, so she go remember home, and you go remember, say love no fit grow for place where no get small smoke." They drove back to Lagos, the sun setting behind them. Charity leaned on his shoulder. "You sure your neighbors no go shout again?" He smiled. "We'll negotiate." Back home, the air was cold and sterile again. Charity wrinkled her nose. "Still smell like hospital." Stanley set the clay pot on the balcony. "Not anymore." That evening, they lit a small fire together. The smoke rose softly into the city sky. For the first time, he didn't rush to put it out. Months later, everyone in the building knew her name. The same caretaker who once threatened eviction now came upstairs for her jollof rice. The young couple next door sought her advice. The old woman on the second floor said, "Her food this smell like my childhood." The apartment that once echoed with silence now pulsed with life. Music, laughter, arguments that ended in kisses. On the balcony, the clay pot stood proudly beside a silver gas cooker, firewood and technology at peace. One Saturday, Charity dragged Stanley to the market. They always send delivery boys. Today, you go experience real life." The noise, the colors, the energy, it overwhelmed him. but she moved through it like music. She introduced him to everyone. "Now my husband, the city engineer, we almost faint when he see pepper smoke." They laughed, and for the first time, Stanley laughed with them. Later that month, Charity transformed their balcony again, hanging fairy lights and herbs, placing a small sign above the clay pot. Local fire, global love. Stanley burst out laughing. "You're unbelievable." "I go start YouTube channel," she said proudly. "Teach city people how to cook with hot. You go handle camera." He agreed. Their first video was pure magic. Her in a colorful apron saying to the camera, "Love no be say you change pes and finish. Na say you go learn small from each other and still chop soup together." The video went viral. Within months, Charity's balcony kitchen became an online sensation. Sponsors came calling. She laughed, waving her phone. "You see, my wahala donde pay." But behind the humor was something deeper. Two hearts finally in sync. One rainy evening, the power went out. Stanley lit candles while Charity warmed soup over her clay pot. "Do you ever miss the village?" he asked. She said, "Sometimes. But now I carry small pot of it here." He smiled, "And I finally understand it." She looked at him curiously. "Understand waiting?" "The fire," he said. "You weren't trying to destroy anything. You were trying to make me feel alive again." She smiled gently. "If love no hot, it no sweet." He laughed. "Let's keep it hot forever." Months passed. Their story became legend in the neighborhood. The city man and the village woman who made peace between firewood and Wi-Fi. They hosted dinners, taught neighbors to cook, filled their home with joy. One evening, while filming, Charity called, "Stanley, come greet my fans." He stepped into the frame, smiling shyly. "Hi everyone, I'm the husband who used to think love should be neat." "And now?" she teased. "Now I know love can be messy and still beautiful." Later that night, they stood on the balcony, the city glowing below, smoke curling softly beside the lights. "Do you ever think about how we started?" he asked. "How I insulted you in the rain?" she said, grinning. He laughed. "And I still married you." She cupped his face. "No, you just lucky." They kissed, softly, sincerely. Smoke rose, blending with the skyline. Fire met steel. Heart met reason. And Stanley finally understood what his mother had meant when she said, "A grown man cannot marry his laptop." Because now, his life wasn't made of code. It was rhythm, laughter, and love that refused to burn out.